welcome everybody, and welcome everyone on Zoom as well. We are here at the Institute of Contemporary History for another series of History on the Edge. And this time we're going to discuss a project that the Institute is involved in. It is the analysis of and responses to extremist narratives. It is a research project that we started in May, coordinated from Paris, with other participants beside our institute, being from Barcelona, Helsinki, Paris, Genova, Cyprus, Italy, Latvia, and so on, and as well Düsseldorf, which is exactly where our dear guest is coming from. More or less the topic of this project is revolving around protest movements, crisis, war, COVID-19 as some of the factors that are triggering and increasing polarization and fuel extreme narratives. This is just a trigger, but the consequences for citizens can be great, especially as well in regard of political decision making, and this is exactly a place that we're headed with by analyzing the responses to extremist narratives. It is a complex topic, not only because it is at the intersection of spatial and temporal context, but also among historical and emotional contexts. And from this point on, I would really like to let Yara explain more of what this is about as a project, and she will also present an example. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me to History on the Edge. Thank you for you that have come here, and thank you for those that are joining in Zoom. We are going through today these topics. First of all, I'm gonna present a bit more on the Projekt ARENAS. Then I'm gonna present what we have done so far and our present and future objectives. And as Sasha Ray announced, I will give a small example. And afterwards will come my favorite part, where actually we discuss together and I can learn from your comments and questions. So about us and about the ARENAS project. This project has as an overall objective to characterize, measure, and understand the role of extremist narratives in discourses, and those will have an impact on the political and social spheres, but also on the stakeholders themselves. This will be us. So Sasha kindly mentioned all the countries that they come from, and those will be our institutions taking part of it. And this will be the 5 main objectives of the project. Being ours, I mean the work package 2, I'm about to introduce us. The identification, analysis, and characterization of extremist narratives linked to 3 topics, that's key as well, science, nation, and gender, okay? However, it is for us very important, once we analyze this topic, to understand as well the roots of those extremist narrative, national specificities, and the monitor of their circulation. And that's why we have a very close relationship with the Work Package 3. That will be, and the team here, particularly in Slovenia, works in both work packages, and that brings me here. Now, the objective of our work package will be then to define the criteria for analyzing, for identifying these extremist narratives. And for doing that, we are testing an operational definition. Okay, so we gave one. And we are identifying patterns of extreme speech and connecting them to the extremist narratives. Okay, and then we will develop an annotation schema and ideally an algorithm for automatic detection. So for that, we have an annotation schema team and a machine learning team as well. The whole idea will be gaining a comprehensive understanding of ideological radicalization, and that will lead eventually to extremism and to those narratives. Okay. What are we? From where will we take this data? So our work package works with 3 types of corpora. And we will have as well a case study, so it is an ethnographic intervention, and gathering information from all those sources will help us to analyze those extremist narratives. This is us. Okay, our work package. I come from the University of Düsseldorf, but our machine learning team is in the University of Cergy. They are as well coordinating this project. The ethnographic project will be done by the CNRS. And here we are, the Institute of National of Contemporary History. And Water on Mars is the one gathering the data, and the Cyprus University is the University of Cyprus. Sorry, it's the one creating the annotation schema, and that's why I'm here as well, because it's part of the work package too. And before presenting what we have done so far, I would like to present our future objectives and the reasons what I'm working at here. Of course, this project, as you saw, it has a very early start. So it just started in May, and therefore all the work I'm presenting right now is a work in progress. Okay. This is what we are doing now. Since I came here, it was like the best setting for work closely with the team here to design an iterative process. That we will carry out actually in the following 4 years. And what we are doing for that is to design a corpus-based framework for a qualitative analysis of those extremist narrative. So in the following months, what we are doing is, in the operational definition that we already have, and I'm going to present in the following slides, we are going to add the definitions from NGOs, okay, because there are NGOs that are working on those topics, and it will be interesting to hear their opinion on the extremist narratives. And right now here in the team, we are developing an inductive corpus-based approach. That means that we are trying to gather data and design what are the characteristics of this extremist narrative based on what actually there is on the corpus. And on top of that, we will investigate the connections between this pattern and extremist narratives. And that is going to go on over and over and over an iterative process the following 4 years. Okay, so right now we started with a working definition, okay, that I will present. And we are going to, what we are doing now is we are going to apply this characteristic that we took from the beginning to a particular case study. In this case, we took one case study that we already knew that most likely will show extremist narrative. In this case, it will be the right-wing reactions to the secret meeting in Potsdam with the AfD and certain Nazi sympathizers. Then, from that, we will try to design a framework for qualitative analysis and bring it to a multilingual corpus. Together with some colleagues from this institute, we are gathering the data for applying actually this framework of analysis to this multilingual corpus. And we are using the corpus in French, in Slovenian, in German, Spanish, and Italian. That will be from the languages of the project, those that we can approach with our language skills. Once we do this qualitative analysis, we will put them together with the results of our literature review, the literature review carried out by the annotation schema team, and the one by machine learning. Plus, we will take into account what the NGOs have to say about this topic. And again, this is an iterative process. So we are going to review again the working definition and start all over again. So, what have we done so far? as said, is a constant back to the future. So actually, every time that we start, we have to test it and then go back to the beginning. And this is, again, work in progress. So that's why I will be very happy, actually, to hear your questions and your comments at the end of the presentation, because probably it's going to prompt many ideas that we can still discuss in the project. What we have done so far. So we have developed the operational definition that we still need to test and identified extremist stakeholder and topics for analysis. We need to identify those because we need to scrap the data preliminary data at the beginning. Now, we carried out a literature review where we needed to, first of all, define certain concepts that will be overlapping constantly with the concept of narrative. Those were, for example, ideology, discourse, and the narrative themselves, but as well concepts as frames or storytelling. So, regarding the narratives with ideology, let's say that the ideology serves as a foundational framework of beliefs and values that will guide individuals' political, ethical, and moral decisions. Within that, we will have a discourse that establishes the boundaries that a certain context allows for the communication within a community. And this discourse shapes interaction and thoughts. And the narrative then will serve as an instrument for those discourses as they encapsulate and shape these realities, and they put in the form of a story these ideological values. And thanks to the techniques that they use in the form of a story, it could be used to influence the collective understanding. Of course, for example, a technique broadly used will be the storytelling, where we will have like the structure of the narrative, and then we will take a particular case, okay, and put a name and certain characteristics to a character in this narrative for making a story. So then we will not talk about a random person that could be affected by that, but we could empathize with this person. For example, this is Jose Antonio, 40 years old, has been working hard his whole life, and now he's going to miss his job. So that will be, for example, the difference with the storytelling. Before presenting the definition of narrative itself, we are going to talk about some key aspects of this narrative. First of all, we are talking about narrated events, okay? But they are not necessarily real. They could be experienced or fictitious. And in these events, we realize that there could be an explanation for a complex socio-political problem, and it implies a solution. This will be the working definition that we are suggesting until now. And it is, extremist narratives are extremist in the sense that they clearly distinguish an in-group and an out-group. And this in-group is morally and ethically superior, and it is perceived as legitimate, okay? And the out-group is framed as both inferior and dangerous, and against exactly the in-group, who puts themselves in the position that they need to defend their interests at all cost, including by means of hostile action and not accepting any alternative views. And they are narratives in the sense that they often rely on the storytelling techniques that will evoke a structured sequence of events caused or experienced by those actors. And they involve actually this dichotomy between us and them, okay? And it serves to anchor emotions and worldviews, and they are often used to propagate and normalize these ideologies. Actually, if we take a look at that definition, we can see two central aspects. One will be the narratological aspects of it, and the other one will be the extremist features. Regarding the narratological aspects, we will have, first of all, actors. So there is very clearly an in-group and an out-group. And interestingly enough, of course, if there is an in-group and an out-group, there will be as well an in-between group. And it is in this telling the stories that it takes place, the cultural battle, that will try to attract and win over this in-between group. There will be events, of course, from the historical point of view. It will give us the historical context. From the discourse, critical discourse analysis point of view, we will be interested in, okay, in these narrations, what events are actually included and what events are left out, okay, and why eventually. And then there will be the story. The story is key because it actually connects all the dots, the in-group, the out-group, and the events themselves. And we are interested, of course, in the structure of those stories. An example of a structure of those stories could be, there was a glorious past. Right now we are living a very decadent present. So let's do this. I offer a solution for a promising future. Yeah. But we cannot forget that these narratives must show extremist features. So for that, we suggest certain characteristics of the in-group. For example, as we already announced in the definition, there will be the moral superiority and the victimization of the in-group. Certain features about the out-group, as it could be inferiority and the perception of danger, of them being dangerous. And therefore, the in-groups feels themselves legitimized to not have tolerance to other views and to defend theirs by causing, fostering, or legitimating hostile actions. Where can we find extremist narratives? So these are some sources that we have checked. For example, right-wing stances towards migration, conspiracy theories are a great source for that. Radical gender discourse, for example, incels, that it's quite a big movement in the internet right now, and COVID denialism. Here could be a really tiny example from COVID discourse. This took place in Germany, so this is the German text, but for those that cannot speak German, I translated it there. And it says, not even the huge military contingent of the fascist BRD regime of injustice on land and in the air can stop the firm determination of the freedom fighters on Freedom Day. The vaccine dictatorship will suffer a crushing defeat. Okay, so this was a very common production during COVID in Germany. What we can see here, actually, it is a very clear outgroup that will be the fascist German government. An in-group, those are the freedom fighters. And the whole story, in a nutshell, will be an illegitimate government is oppressing the people, and a few freedom fighters stand up for their rights of not getting vaccinated. Okay. So this will be a very tiny example, and now I'm about to expand it with the meta-narrative of the anti-Spain. So this example was developed by Sergi Soler from the Work Package 3 and me some time ago, June last year. And we have been working all over and over since then. Okay. These are the historical roots. I'm not a historian myself. I am from the linguistics. But it is important that we use both linguistics and history as a compass for each other. So, for instance, we detect that there are certain extremist narrative, and it would be great to track them back in time. Okay, that's why we really want to foster the collaboration with the Work Package 3 of historical roots. And on the other way around, if you're tracking a certain extremist narrative that keep evolving, it will be great to have the support of the linguist to actually see how it is nowadays. This particular slide was not prepared by me, but by Miguel Ángel del Río and Sergi Soler. And it is interesting because you can see the anti-space taking place right now, and you can see how it tracks back in the history of Spain. Apart from the whole history of Spain, that could include, of course, la Reconquista Española. It could include as well the colonialism of Spain. We have a very key point that could be the dictatorship of Franco, that has derived into something that we call the sociological Francoism, that it is actually the consequences that you can observe nowadays of how certain features after the dictatorship, of course it's a very recent dictatorship that lasted 40 years, but those features can still be seen nowadays. And that's why we really think that we should collaborate together, because it's a great way of tracking it. Now, how can we see nowadays these consequences of what has been going on through the history? So this will be a great conceptualization of the anti-Spain. Funny enough, this is actually an advertisement of the elections, of the past elections in Spain. And it was a legal advertisement. It was only withdrawn because several complaints were received. Okay, if we translate it here, it is from the political party Vox, that it will be like our more extreme right-wing party. And it says, in the middle, decide what matters. And then in the left, there is opposing. On the left, in red, imposition, insecurity, division, poverty, neglect, invasion. I don't think it was a matter of hazard, the election of colors, or where you position this column and the other one. On the right, in green, freedom, security, family, industry, countryside. Okay, and in the middle you can see several symbols that represent certain ideologies or institutions in Spain, and they are literally littered. Okay, those could be Agenda 2030, that has to do with environmental issues, feminist symbols, LGBTIQ plus community symbol, and Catalan independentist symbol that will be an aspect of nationalism. So that was actually a really good visual example of the meta-narrative that is going on. Something important is that this anti-Spain is a meta-narrative. That means that it includes different narrative in itself. For instance, the actors that we could see and that has been developed all over the years will be the following. So in the in-group, we have the españoles de bien. So these are the good Spanish people and true patriots that are defenders of the nation. Some parts of the popular party, so it is the PP, that will be the right-wing central party, liberal movements, neo-fascist groups, far-right think tanks, and fundamentalist Christians. Then we will have an out-group that will be, of course, the anti-España, the people that are against the nation. So it will be enemies of the nation, that it's seeking its destruction. And those are represented by the PSOE allies. PSOE will be like the left-wing central party that it's right now in the government with the support of many other parties. The peripheral nationalism, as we already saw, feminism, the LGBTIQ plus evil lobby, the globalist powers, New World Order, trying to erase the sovereignty of the Spanish nation. That will include as well communist, anti-tradition groups, and the climate fanatics, multiculturalism and institutions of the European Union. Now, this meta-narrative has certain events included. So when we are talking about this meta-narrative, let's not forget that it's from the point of view always from the in-group rather than from the out-group. So these are the events that are included in from the past years to expose this story. As said, it is a meta-narrative, so it means that there are a lot of small narratives inside. So for exposing one of the stories, we are going to focus in these two particular events. That will be the introduction of the law on trust and rights and sexual freedom, or it is called the sexual consent, and a lot of controversy among conservative and radical feminist groups. The story that will, let's say, join the dots of these in-group, out-group, and events will be the part of Spain that it is the anti-Spain that supports gender ideology, as they represent a direct attack upon the traditional society and moral values. What are those moral values? Well, as you can see, particularly in the dictatorship regime, there is the idea of the Catholic traditional family and what is the natural order of things. So biology is real. And there is an adaptation nowadays of the anti-feminism. Okay, so because you cannot be declared completely anti-feminist, so you need to actually make an adaptation. So how can we see this story? Okay, so that will be from our point of view as linguists of interest. For example, we could see it in real declarations of different stakeholders that are pronouncing themselves in this. In this particular case, we took certain aspects either from certain extracts, either from a political speech or from an interview. And we will have, all of them are from the same party. And we will have the first one. Their goal is not to protect women, but to destroy straight white men. Okay? Then we will have, in Vox, we are not going to allow our children to learn about gender ideology. And then we have, with the issue of case, we have gone from homosexual relationships being prohibited, persecuted, even punished, to being more or less tolerated. Then accepted quite naturally, and now they are being promoted. And the next thing is that they are compulsory. So I have presented already the in-group, the out-group, the events that will be included, how this story is presented. So I would like to take a minute to analyze actually the extremist features. Actually, when we see these quotes, we can see, remember the slide of extremist features about the victimization of the danger and the intolerance to others' view. We can actually see what are the linguistic aspects that will support those features. For example, in case of not protecting women, but to destroy straight white men, you picture actually the outgroup as a danger, and therefore you are the victim of it. You are going to be destroyed. Okay? Then we are not going to allow that position yourself in a moral superiority to decide what is allowed or what is not. And of course, as well supports the idea of there is an intolerance of others' view. Okay? And the next thing is that they are going to be compulsory. There is an obvious victimization, but as well an idea of them being inferior to the outgroup, to the outgroup ideology, and being a real danger so much that they are going to become a compulsory thing to do. So we have seen through this presentation how we are going to, how we can check from a linguistic point of view these narratives, approach to them, and how to track them back in time. And that really supports my idea that we need to work together the historical roots and the linguistic features. But if that will be with a zoom in certain local aspect. But if we do a zoom out, because we are a big project, so there is not only a multidisciplinary perspective, which is already rich enough, but there is as well a lot of different corpus that we can work on and a lot of different historical contexts that we can work on. For instance, we have seen already in the map how many countries are participating. So that brings us to certain questions that, by the way, they will be answered as well from Work Package 3, together with the results of the historical root analysis and the linguistic perspective, that could look at Europe as a whole. So, to answer questions like what narratives appear or reappear, where do those narratives take place? What do they have in common? From a linguistic perspective, for example, it's very interesting to see when can we start talking about a different narrative? What are the fundamental elements of a narrative that keep making this narrative the same narrative? Because obviously, if something similar happens in other countries, actually, is it the same narrative? What are the elements that we can exchange to start talking about the same? And why do they appear in a certain country in one point and in another country it takes a while, or more interestingly, when they appear at the same time? So this will be, after all this analysis, that will be the circulation of these narratives, how to track them, how they move, and how they move not only from a synchronical point of view, but as well from a diachronical point of view. And I guess you have noticed the memes around the presentation, and I would like to take the opportunity to present how I personally am trying to contribute as well to the project, not as a work package leader, but as well as personal individual researcher. And it will be with memes and how memes, the internet culture, actually can hinder or foster those extremist narrative. In Barcelona, there will take place a conference in September. It has not been announced yet, but I will be presenting there actually the role of certain memes that will show how this sociological Francoism is used in the internet culture. So we can see, for example, in this one, how it was Spain before the Reconquista and the idea of how is Spain after the Reconquista. Then the fallacy that I think we have often used, how a past has always been better. So we will have in the central aspect of it, from the 60s to the 2020s, how Spain has evolved and the possibilities of buying a house, having children, the traditional marriage, how this idea of family has evolved. And that contains itself the idea that any past was glorious. Right now we are living a decadent present, and that sets a great a scenario for offering what could be a promising future. And then we will have the third one, that it is, so my lord, Los Omeyas, so it will be Spain was under the Arabic power over 800 years, so it will be a reference to that. They are invading us again, okay? And it says like, oh, arrest him, he's using hate speech. Okay, so they are picturing with this meme, that's a very famous meme, if it is empty, Spain nowadays, where you are not supposed to talk with freedom about your own opinion, because your opinion could be hate speech, and that will bring us to an even more decadent future given the present that we have. Okay, and these are real memes that they are used nowadays, that you can actually find nowadays. And that means that that these narratives keep circulating, but they are circulating so much that they have become a concept, and they are conceptualized and really evoked in a small image. So it is very interesting how even, and that will be so my next step, how even memes that could be using irony, they might be perpetuating the same narratives all over again, because when you use a certain stereotype, a certain aspect, for example, in the sociological Francoism, you can say the sentence, that didn't happen when Franco was here. Even if you are using it for rebelling against it, actually you are evoking always the same framework and the same frame, and you are kind of like setting a great place for perpetuating this kind of narrative. So that is my own personal research. And now, as said, comes my very favorite part, where I hear your questions and your comments, and we can actually open a discussion. Thank you so much for listening. Please.
About how many you talked about the anti-Spain.
Yes.
Can I just confirm that's your analytical term?
No, actually, it is a historical term that it has been used.
You're using it as an analytical term. That's your choice to use that term.
Yes.
As opposed to something you find in your primary sources.
No. In our primary sources, it has been named anti-Spain as well. So there has been the concept of the anti-España.
What I'm concerned about is that it's sort of related to your final talk about you reify the discourses and perpetuate the discourses by using the terminology of the discourses. It seems to me that a lot of what fighting extremism is about fighting over who has the right to speak for Spain, who has the right to speak for Germany. And so right-wing extremists say, I'm the true patriot, and these other people are not. And it seems to me it's one of the tasks of the left to say that, no, we represent the German national interest. We represent the Spanish national interest. Spain is also a progressive country. Germany is also a progressive country with a left history. And so to say that to use the term anti-Spain or anti-Germany or anti-Celine or whatever as an analytical term, it seems to me that you're ceding the national ground to the right, which seems unwise politics to me.
I love it. And I'm going to take it into account, and I'm gonna discuss it with the rest of the project. As this project has just started, we are trying to analyze what it exists right now, and we are not still in the point where we are trying to counteract it. So this, but I really will take that into account, because as it is a political used concept, I think it is something important that we need to use for following presentations. So thank you for your suggestion on that. Once I discuss it, if we still decide to use this term, I will come back to you with why we decided so.
Any other questions? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, if I may, thank you for your presentation, but we have plenty of questions. I will try to limit them to just a few. I was going to ask from a different perspective, but also question about what about the left extremism, because most of the examples strongly linked to the right, just the whole list is typical right wing radical right-wing program or agenda. So yeah, first of all, balance if you're going to look for it. But second of all, you talked about the definition, working definition, operational definition that you're trying to come up with, and you also said that, wrote in your slides that you're going to first ask NGOs to come up with the, if I got it correctly, with a working definition. Have you thought about expanding that and actually talking to representatives of, or former maybe representatives of in-groups, like former QAnon supporters who are not following it anymore, or any other groups that you might be interested in coming up with it? On the other hand, is there a legal definition in any of the countries that you are looking at in terms of national security, for instance? So are there any legal definitions of extremism that actually are part of the legal system and might, and these practices might have a particular criminal follow-up, for instance? And one more quick question. Overall, are you looking at extremism as popular following up, spreading, fostering some narratives, or from a state perspective, state political extremism that might threaten the state, which is done by some groups which in fact fight for power one way or another?
Of course, this has been like all these matters has been of huge debate, or are still a huge debate in the project. I think that's the beauty of this project in particular, because it brings actually a lot of disciplines together and of a topic that has not been so much regulated. So I'm going to start with this one, with the legal definitions. Actually, that we know of, there is no legal definition of extremist narrative. There are other aspects that are regulated that we are trying to integrate. For instance, hate speech, or when certain actions bring to terrorism. Of course, I'm not a legal expert, but I know that we are really using those definitions as well for knowing ourselves what we need to look at from a linguistic point of view. So those are the ones that we are really talking about. At the end of the day, this project comes as well from a previous hate speech project related. And that it's indeed regulated. So we are trying to set the basis on those things and other legal aspect that could be in the same environment. Now, I do understand the point of view of left-wing extremists. So we indeed got a justification of the data on how we selected the first stakeholders. And actually, first of all, we were interested in all the aspects where you can be extremist. Let's remember that this project is particularly focused on gender, nation, and science. So we were interested in groups that could have an extremist narrative regarding those topics. Very often we ended up in actually right-wing ideology-related groups, and we could see as well in the European landscape, and if you observe it from a historical point of view, that those right-wing ideology-related groups will lead to more exclusionist policies that could harm actually democracy and social cohesion. So that's why we decided to go more from that, particularly as well because they will show chauvinistic, xenophobic, misogynist perspectives. And of course, every time that you are going to go for extremes, you need to select a center, because at the end of the day, you're in the center and you are checking the extremes on the other side. So we decided to go for liberal democracy, and that will give us the explanation to treat maybe as extremist certain parties that are right now in power, because we will look at them from that perspective. And it's very interesting what you say about taking into account the in-group perspective. Again, for sure, when you are talking about extremism, you need to position yourself somewhere. Okay, so if you are looking at extremism from the point of view of extremist, that's never going to be extremist. However, it is interesting to have their opinion, of course, to triangulate the information. That's why there are, for example, in our work package, there is a group that is carrying out an ethnographic exploration that will allow them to integrate themselves in these groups and take their perspective in order to triangulate this information. I think I answered all your questions.
Yeah, the last question was about a popular general, like housewife style, supporting these groups on Twitter or something like that, versus established groups, political parties maybe that are in fight for power in the end. So what would be the purpose of this extremist speech? To ultimately that you would be tracking to just as an emotional release for some, or as a way of creating chaos and actually getting to power? Who would be the stakeholders, basically? Would you consider the stakeholders of these strategies that you're looking at?
Depending on which is the task of the project, they will focus on one or the other. For example, in the linguist, we are scraping data from social media, so it will be more like what is happening in the open broad public. But I know that work package 3 will focus more in one of the tasks in parliament discourses, so they will focus on that aspect. And there will be another task as well related to analysis of discourse. That will focus on what the media says about what the political aspect says. So, so how to generate the public opinion. So we will, our focus on certain stakeholders will be depending on what our objective is. And we have designed this first preliminary election of stakeholders because we need to start somewhere. But we are very open to keep collecting and gathering data from whatever the results of this analysis are that are still not carried out. I don't know if I have answered or not. Okay.
Well, it's work in progress, you said that.
Yes, definitely. Yes.
I mean, I had a turn. Anyone else? I was interested in your you have your description of an extreme scenario, and there's there's a problem, and then you have a proposed solution.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if you were testing non-extremist scenarios as a comparison, because I wondered that just seems like ordinary political talk to me. So if you find yourself extremist narratives have a subject and a verb. Wow, extremists use verbs. Everyone uses a verb. So, I mean, how do you know that the narratives you're discussing are unique to extremists and not just sample political rhetoric that's common to both extremists and non-extremists?
Maybe that was not clear enough. When I gave that the structure was actually from any narratological point of view. When we were analyzing the anatomy of the extremist narrative, there is a narratological aspect. And one of them will be the story, and actually it's an excellent story already to say the glorious past and the decadent present and the promising future, and that is not going to make you an extremist per se. So that's why we added on top of that the extremist features, and the one that we have so far collected, it is based on the literature and a very preliminary corpus based analysis that we hope to increase in the following months. So we have this narrative, this concept, But then we need to make sure that we pay attention to what kind of narratives we are focusing on. That will be the extremist one. And that one will be like the hostile action, intolerance to the point of view, and the ones that, how they in-group portray themselves versus how they portray the out-group. Yeah, or...
Well, the question is, how is it different from a non-extremist narrative?
Because no extremist narrative are not showing the extremist features. So we will be
But
like
that's
from...
kind of tautological, isn't it? I mean, we're going to find our extremist narratives by only looking at narratives that are extremist.
Oh, well, at the beginning, we are checking. So what are the aspects, according to the literature, that could be qualifying as extremist? Now, once we have the data, we are going to start building what is the different narratives that we can draw from the data. Actually, to draw this narrative is already quite an abstract concept, and we are still deciding how to do that best, how to approach to that best, because we have, of course, the data itself, and then from the particular text and the particular production, you have to start drawing what is the narrative that is actually going through all of them. And from that on, then we say like, oh, okay, so we know from the literature that we are searching for these kind of things. And this is and that is what we are considering right now extremist. But it is an iterative project, process. So if we, by observing that, we see that there are certain features that appear and that could be extremist, then it will be better to add it as one of the features. If we see that there is one that we consider at the beginning that does not appear, then we will try to delete it. But we need to start from somewhere. That's why we decided to go for an operational definition and starting from there. Do you have any suggestion on how to better approach that?
Other people may have questions.
Okay, I will be happy to have as well a private conversation regarding that. Methodological approaches to this is very, very complicated.
It is, yeah, and it's also very interesting how suddenly, if you already define some things on the one end of the extreme, suddenly something else is being used or abused and positioned on the other end. Like the countryside was very interesting when you showed Vox, and then on one side with the red it was all bad words, which I forgot. But then on the other side you had also listed elements that are green and that are okay, and then there was also countryside in there. So suddenly a word that is not necessarily problematic finds itself in a very problematic position. Or the cat, when you showed like the in one of the last slides there was if we can just, I don't know how the cat found itself in the image, yeah. In the end, we see the decadent family owns the cat. So suddenly the cat found itself involved in this narrative.
I think that's supposed to be the victim families. In the glorious 60s, you had 4 children, then you only have 3 children, then 2 children, and then only 1. Then you can only afford a dog, and now only a cat.
And you end up with a cat.
It's more about victimization than anything else.
Yeah, but again, it's an element that suddenly it is conflicting even, and it gives a meaning even if per se doesn't have to.
Yeah. Any other questions? Maybe if we have online, no. Then just we can discuss other additional questions later. I will kindly invite you now for a coffee. The ones who are at our institute, but the ones who are not. Are as well, and invite all of you are invited for our next round of History on the Edge. It is on Monday, March 18th, and we are having guests arriving from Japan, more specifically from Tokyo University of Agriculture and Technology, They will present the history of mountainous hamlets in Japan since the 1960s, focusing on population decline and disaster control. So from extremes to disasters, I would like to thank you, Anna, Yara, and everyone else who joined us in this lecture and drink coffee.
Thank you.